We have the pleasure of being joined by Tully, who is the Director of Product Management here at Bonterra. Tully builds groundbreaking case management products at Bonterra. She leads the product vision, strategy, and roadmap for ETO and Apricot, empowering health and human service nonprofits and public sector organizations to track and amplify the progress that they bring to their communities. Prior to Bonterra, Tully worked in management consulting, and she served on project teams at the Gates Foundation focused on agriculture, nutrition, family planning, and malaria. Tully currently lives in Austin, Texas, with her husband and two dogs, Lars and Vigo. In her free time, she works with maternal health, reproductive justice, and affordable housing nonprofits, and serves on the board for Giving Austin Labor Support. So that is who we have the pleasure of being joined by today. Thank you for your time, Tully, and thank you everyone for joining us. And I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I just heard Lars and Vigo, like their collars shake when they heard their name.
They heard me.
But I am so pleased to be here talking about my favorite thing in the world, which is ETO and Apricot's product roadmap and what we're doing. But before we dive into the roadmap, I want to take a second, and the next couple slides will be focused about the company, what is Bonterra, like what is the context that we're operating under, our vision, and then the rest of the time we'll really dig into how that vision has and will come to life in Apricot and ETO. So hopefully most folks know what Bonterra is, but I know that you and everyone on your staff log into ETO and Apricot. So I want to take a moment to just kind of ground us. So Bonterra is a collection of tools for funders, supporters, and doers of good that came together in August of 2021. The dream is to meet the needs of all the folks operating in corporate social responsibility, in fundraising engagement, and case management. And I did see just a Q&A. When we say case management, we mean the collection of case management, program management, and impact management, all those practices. The dream is to best meet the needs of all the folks working in these social good functions with well-designed, capable software. That is why we are all here. But if you ask any product manager what their favorite question is, it is why? Tell me why. So why did these companies come together? And spoiler alert, like the theme of this presentation, it is meaningful progress does not happen in silos. So individual supporters, institutional funders, and of course, nonprofits and public sector agencies interact to make services happen. So for us, it's about making your day-to-day become more effective and efficient, so doing good more easily. It's about making the interactions between volunteer, you, the provider, and the funder smoother, more targeted and personal. And it's about making your efforts more visible and your story heard, which sounds great, but what does that actually mean? Our main purpose of our company, when we boil it down to the main reason we exist, is to straight up increase the amount of resources flowing to doers of good. And we're harnessing the support and dollars available across Bonterra in those fundraising and engagement tools, in those corporate social responsibility tools to make that happen. And we've given ourselves a quantitative goal, which we love, and it's a lofty one. We've given ourselves the goal of moving as a percentage of GDP from about 2% of giving to 3% of giving. We've been stuck around 2% for about 60 years. So if we just move that 1%, we're talking billions, billion with a B, more dollars flowing into doers of good. Now that begs the question of, whoa, that's massive. How are you going to make that happen? And where do you start? How do you do this? And yes, it's massive, but we believe that your work and your services demand it. So how do we make 3% by 33 meaningful for you? And the real answer is that we have to come to the table with technology that meets your needs as best as possible, which sounds great, but then begs another question, which is, how do you learn and build for our needs? Like, how do you actually know what we need? And the answer to that is through discovery and a particular lens, which we do discovery, which is called jobs to be done, which, spoiler alert, might be the third question. But discovery is similar to what providers do when you are designing your programs. What's going on with participants? What are the constraints that we are operating under? What are the non-negotiables that need to happen? And discovery is all the channels that we use to assess those needs. So that might mean talking with you all directly on Zoom. It might mean doing site visits, surveys, funding research, prototype reviews. All of that is what we call discovery. And those are all actions which are enormously helpful for our product, my teams, design, data, and engineering. I would say in software, perhaps the most transformative framework or way of thinking that has come about since user-centered design is jobs to be done. So things happen in threes. The universe likes threes. On to our next slide. What are jobs to be done? So jobs to be done is a framework, a philosophy that underpins all of those discovery exercises that we are doing. And the main takeaway is that y'all are using software to accomplish objectives in real life, like get this participant to safe housing, get this kiddo a car seat. You are not really looking to create a record in Apricot or to build a report in ETO. So it's a fundamental shift in focus. So I really think it's helpful for these examples to bring to life, and I really like the Verizon one. It moves the focus away from the software itself to the motivations and the context and the outcomes, and that is what we are obsessed with. So, for example, in Verizon, you are not making a phone call, really. You are not making a record in Apricot. What you're doing is using Apricot or using the cell service like Verizon to connect with a loved one or to get a piece of important news. And so we need to optimize for connecting with a loved one and getting important news. So now what I want to show you is this is not all of the jobs to be done, but what we've come to understand through discovery are the most critical jobs to be done for executive directors, program coordinators, caseworkers, data analysts, and evaluators, and all the iterations on those names. So this is our favorite slide. This is our Rosetta Stone of jobs to be done for case, program, and impact management with the title of case management. Notice that these jobs snuggle very nicely under our vision themes of doing good more easily, making meaningful connections, and scaling your impact. Now, I'm not going to read through every job here because every slide, every feature on our roadmap will be associated with each one of these jobs. Now, I'll let that sit. But before we dig into recently released, we have a poll. So Ashley, I'm going to cue you up, but in your funding or program cycle, we want to understand kind of where you are feeling the most challenge and the most pressure. And yes, this is an example of discovery.
Awesome. Results are kind of trickling in, but it seems like it's a little split between tracking and measuring participant programs,
Okay.
excuse me, and then communicating impact and scaling results, with tracking leading the way, but a good split.
That makes sense. All right, I love it. We'll keep that in mind as we continue through our presentation. So first off, let's start with Apricot recently released Align to JTBD, jobs to be done. But I want to take a second and make our legal team happy and note that this is the current view. So With a current administration, we're staying on our toes if we need to pivot. So please use this for informational purposes. And if you are making a big commercial decision, just know that this is based on our current view, and things can change. So this is recently released for Apricot from October until now. October was our last roadmap review. So starting with, I'm so pleased to kick it off with draft records in Apricot. I think this was in our top 10, I think around 6 or 7 in our ideas portal for some time. But drafts are meant to get you the partial and then the full picture of participants so that, notice the jobs to be done, you can really assess the needs and give tailored support to your participants. So we love drafts. We needed to have drafts for a long time. Saving progress is pretty standard in the consumer products that you use and others that you might use in your professional life. So an example is, I remember I was doing a site visit with a runaway youth overnight shelter. And some of the kiddos, they might not know their social security number, or they didn't totally trust the staff yet enough to give out their name. But we needed to get that data in the system to understand how many people are coming through the door and other critical questions. We also heard from Discovery that it's super common in case management that you are seeing participant after participant after participant, and you don't have time to sit down and complete the form and all the required fields. And so you have sticky notes, and there's actually the shadow system outside of ETO or Apricot with important information that really should be in a secure system. So we listened to your feedback. We released the first version of drafts. And then we listened even more because our first version of drafts in the search page had a status column for draft or not. And then we heard it wasn't well loved, but we listened and pivoted, and we released Draft Manager. So you have a dedicated space where you can see everything that's in progress, and go ahead and finish out the records that you have started. So if you haven't activated yet, I highly recommend checking it out. It is available in all Apricot packages. Next up, hopefully my data nerds are like, more data in our results reporting engine. So results reporting is our tool, actually available in both ETO and Apricot, but this is specific to a piece of Apricot data. Is closer to a business intelligent tool. It's got way more powerful querying abilities, processing high volumes of data, and wider options of visualizations. So now enrollments data, our purpose-designed enrollment and exit module, can be pulled into new and reports that you already rely on. So a quick plug for enrollments. This has been something, this piece of data that has been really like so exciting for us. We can see that across all apricots using that enrollment and exit feature, because there's a minimum set of data fields that are exactly the same across every apricot, we can see tremendous insights. And one of those is consistently we see that about 70% of all enrolled participants have a successful exit, which is so huge. And I want to yell and scream to the rooftops about how exciting that is. Okay. And next up is, I cannot have this presentation without mentioning the security and performance work that is always happening behind the curtain, behind the scenes. So I like to say this is the work that you should feel, but not necessarily see. The job here is all about setting up the environment for your staff to work, putting your program operations into a data system that works and is responsive and is super fast. The specific callouts in terms of work we've done without getting super technical is we've moved the highest traffic API endpoints to best-in-class architecture. The pace of technology is changing fast, and sometimes a new service will pop up that is not light years, but something shorter than light years, better. And we need to update those underlying services. We've also upgraded the service that processes logins and authentication. So the idea here is always improve the highest traffic, most important parts of the system while we take care of the rest of the system. So stability is sexy. We love it. Next up is ETO for also recently released. And note, this is from October until now. Super excited to talk about workflow and alerts. I think both in ETO and Apricot, maybe apart from reporting, that workflow and alerts are my favorite feature. I like it so much because it's how direct service staff flow through our software, and there's so much potential here. So the job here is kind of maybe in that program director realm. It's so important to have a good handle on how program execution is going. Why? So that we are understanding workloads and are always checking against burnout, so that we are staying within our budget and continue operations, and we understand capacity, what we can say yes or no to, or what resources we need to ask for in our next funding or next grant to go after, because we understand capacity. So long awaited, significant work to improve the processing times of especially complex workflows in ETO. So I remember when we were doing discovery, we heard the example of when an Afghani refugee hits US soil, so many things need to happen in a very strict timeline. That is so important to get that workflow right. And this work, the performance work, actually improved processing times by 10x for workflows, and actually even more for alerts. So very excited that this is now out. Moving right into ETO for in development. So these are features and capabilities that engineers have their hands on right now and are coding away at. Continuing with workflow alerts is cross-check. So same job to be done. What Sarah Sweet on my team and her engineering teams have done is listened, and would love it if things happened linearly in health and human services. But as we all know, they do not. So sometimes I have this person in front of me, and I'm going to grab them and do XYZ, regardless if that was the next task that needed to happen in the workflow. So cross-check is kind of a pull in and sort mechanism that looks for any activity for that participant and sees if the task might have been completed outside of the flow or the interface of the workflow. And if it has, it will update that workflow to make sure that those tasks are checked off. So actually, spoiler alert, this is available right now for touchpoint data. I think we released it 3 or 4 weeks ago. But we're going to do iterative releases, bringing in more of ETO's real estate into this cross check functionality. So we need to add in entities, we need to add in families. So you'll see that in subsequent releases. So keep an eye out on your email for when those will be available. All right, switching gears back over to Apricot, what we are currently working on. Importing enrollments. So the job to be done here is understanding progress at a program level. I like to say that case management is about answering what does this individual person need, and program management is understanding and tracking and designing for what does this community or population need. And so you have to do things en masse sometimes. So if you're switching from another system, or you're standing up another program, or if you're just getting started with Apricot, or you just have to do things in batch, it was hard to use enrollments before. But now enrollments on that enrollment and exit tool, you can use through our import tool. So we are super excited to be currently working on that. Next up, also in our enrollment world, the enrollment train keeps coming, is that we are improving your ability to report on tier 2s attached to an enrollment. So this job is more in that case management realm, which is about understanding individual progress. And that means assessing the starting point. While the data minimums of that enrollment and exit object allow us things to see like programmatic completion rate, they don't tell us the specifics we need to design a particular care plan for a participant. So in community violence, does this person have access to firearms? Or in maternal health, when is your due date? And is this your first kiddo? Right? Those aren't standard objects. They're going to live on an enrollment. That data lives in configured forms that get attached to the enrollments that have those data minimums that are the same across all apricots. So what actually is this? It is the ability to report on tier 2s attached to program enrollments nicely in native reporting. It is the ability to report and filter on assigned staff. And it is ensuring that native reporting is using the site and program, using site and program that the program enrollment itself is under versus the tier 1 program assignment. So very excited about that, anything in reporting. And then I feel like I need a drum roll for this one. I'm very excited to introduce the Bonterra API. Another real benefit of being part of Bonterra is the ability to develop shared services, meaning, fundraising products likewise need an API to interact real time with other systems. So instead of working on every action, mobilize, and Apricot's API independently, there are parts that can be shared, and there's actually a real benefit from sharing. So I'm pleased to announce that we have Apricot lined up for the Bonterra API. What that really means is that we are working towards Apricot having an API available to you for development in addition to development with our third-party partners. So we'll be doing significant communication on this in early midsummer, so please stay tuned. Okay, and to wrap it up with Apricot in development, so hands-on code right now, our service provider networks. Y'all are working really hard on entrenched problems that span generations. So substance abuse, homelessness, gun violence, getting a participant to a healthy, safe place takes coordinated effort given multiple times over time. It is not typically the case from what I've seen that single organizations have every service, every resource, every intervention that someone experiencing homelessness needs. So coordination is key, critically important. Coming soon, you will be able to join collaboratives or service provider networks in Apricot so that vibrancy that providers have in real life should match your software. So this service provider network, which is I'm working with these other apricots, and this is kind of our designated lead apricot, become very, very powerful when paired with other upcoming technology that I'm going to walk you through. But before we dive into that, Ashley, I think we have our last poll of our hour, which is, are you involved in any collaboratives or coalitions?
Responses are trickling in, but overwhelmingly, most folks are. They are involved.
Good, good. Fantastic. Well, I'm going to keep it moving and move into back to ETO, but upcoming. So these are features and capabilities that we aren't necessarily coding on now, but are in active discovery, research, prototyping, that early phase of product development. Now back to API world, but specifically the referrals API in ETO will be getting some love. So I think referrals are a perfect example of a collaboration pathway that happens between providers in a service provider network. And while I would love it If every provider was on Apricot and ETO, that is not a reality, and likely will never be the reality. So that means integrations become crucial. So folks using ETO's referral feature will now be able to retract and reject through the API, or they will in the future. And then shifting gears again to Apricot upcoming. This is very exciting, and this is the first time I think we've verbally talked to y'all about the Bonterra Network. So recall in our vision section that the whole reason we came together and acquired all these different disparate software tools is because they all hold a persona that supports and desires the work of another persona, right? So an institutional funder wants to fund a nonprofit. A volunteer, a supporter, a micro donor also wants to support a nonprofit, right? And nonprofits need to establish relationships with all kinds of funders. We want those interactions between personas and the support that they give each other. They don't particularly exist in technology now, or if they do, it's in all these different other systems, and it's not the system of record or your system that you work in and do the majority of your professional work in. So when you see the word Bonterra Network, that means any feature or capability where these personas will be coming together to accomplish certain goals. And I'm very excited to talk about those first capabilities. Now, don't forget the jobs to be done, which is definitely here, which it is always a job, an ever-present job that we have, which is to find, apply for, and report on grant requirements so that we can continue out the mission. One of a perfect example of a nonprofit and funder coming together is through a grant, making a grant, applying for a grant, and reporting for a grant. So that functionality is now a Bonterra Network feature called Bonterra Grant Match. There is a paired functionality called the Bonterra Nonprofit Hub. So think about the nonprofit hub is your home base. This is where you say what your programs are, who is responsible for them, eventually where disbursements will happen for those grants. It becomes the home base for the nonprofit persona in the network. And then the feature where we come together is Grant Match. So Bonterra has funders, so we have a proprietary kind of list of funders and grants. Because you are Apricot and ETO users, you have access to that proprietary list of grants. So Grant Match is a feature where you enter some information about yourself, some of it in the nonprofit hub, and get matched using AI and other matching technologies to pair you with grants that might be a great fit. In addition, we have applied a layer of generative AI, which helps you complete the grant application, which also happens in Grant Match. So really exciting and a very tangible, specific example of why Bonterra exists and what we're trying to do connecting these personas. So I actually tried it out thinking about GALS, Giving Austin Labor Support, a group that I work with here in Austin in maternal health and equity. And I was fairly impressed with the matches, and I did it a couple months ago. So I highly recommend that y'all think about it. And if you have the time in your program or funding cycle, please try this out. If you would like to try it out, I highly recommend reaching out to me directly so that I can confirm your slot. My email is here. It will be shared in the recording and at the end of the presentation. So hopefully this is appropriately hyped. Back to Apricot upcoming. So Apricot and ETO, y'all both have access to Grant Match. But Apricot, this is data standards. So recall earlier when I said pairing functionality with service provider networks becomes very powerful. Data standards is a perfect example of that. So the modules like enrollments that hold data minimums unlock insights like, wow, 70% of enrollments end in a successful exit. Collaboratives need that level of information too. So imagine being able to understand across a city how many doses of Narcan had been administered and being able to see that relative to hospital admission rate across multiple providers working together. Or imagine being able to click a button and report to your national organization data that only that national organization needs to see and under your control. And that's the job to be done we're referencing here, which is the often laborious task of formatting and reporting program indicators and progress to all your different funders. We want to make that much easier. Weeks to days to hours to a click. That's what we're working towards. So to enable that world, that like Narcan dose across a city relative to hospital admissions, 3 of the upcoming features that are upcoming will enable that. And the first is data standards. So data standards are fields determined by a lead of the network that need to be collected by every provider in that network. So everyone needs to be tracking a person's name, address, employment rate, access to firearms. Cool. Everyone in Portland is tracking that. And eventually we will be able to aggregate and see that information across multiple apricots working together. That is the dream. Now, the second piece of functionality, in addition to data standards, which are those configured fields that everyone is tracking, those get paired with other data minimums on objects aligned to jobs to be done. Enrollments is the perfect example. So these core objects, they meet the same job as we're getting our operations around us. They need to exist. Right now, before enrollments existed, we had 3,000 apricots tracking enrollments in 3,000 different ways, which is tough if you need to collaborate. So there is a level of standardization on top of a level of richness and configuration that needs to exist to unlock this collaborative type of working model and reporting. So data standards paired with core objects equal measuring collective action, which we are all here for. So over time, you will see more and more features and functionality that look like enrollments coming to Apricot. So think program, participant, caseload, service, external event, intervention. We've got attendance and inventory, an indicator, an assessment, an outcome, and an exit. These things will start to morph more into not 3,000 different ways to track an outcome, but we as Bonterra suggest, oh, this looks like an outcome. You probably need these 3 or 4 data minimums and then attach all the custom tier 2s you want to it. So you'll see more and more of this. This is all in service of enabling collaboration and measuring collective action. And the last piece, which is super important, in addition to data standards, in addition to core objects, is you need to see proof of the data you are entering on those 2 things happening, like what's actually going on. So with Bonterra reporting, aggregation of those data standards and parts of data minimums held on these core objects can get aggregated. So that say, cool, Portland, I see for this week relative to last week, hospital admissions are down and Narcan administration was up, right? You can see that go 1,000, more than 1,000 different ways in each cause and geography of folks on this call. So this particular capability is about aggregating only pieces of information that are agreed upon to be shared so that a funder, a lead agency, and members of service provider networks can truly see what what their individual efforts are rolling up to in terms of collective action. And this is huge, and this is what I want my team to be working on for the next months and years. All right. Now, we are transitioning into the closing part. What I'm excited to say is that, like, oh, totally cool. We see you twice a year to learn about the roadmap, and I can probably like ask the one or two people I know at Bonterra, but we really need more consistent information of what the roadmap is at any given time. And so the answer is yes, for both Apricot and ETO, we will be creating content like this that will be available in your EBRs, your executive business reviews, and to anyone you work with internally here at Bonterra. So really excited to have that and make sure that y'all have the flow of information you need from us. But with that, Ashley, I think I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tully. I just have to say, I'm not a nonprofit, but I'm very excited for that grant match feature. I think folks will be really excited for that. I know that's been talked about with some customers, and it's all what we want, right? To find funding easily. So, very exciting stuff here. So, we'll go ahead and transition to Q&A. We do have a lot of questions coming in through the chat, and we're going to do our best to get through as many. But like I mentioned earlier, folks on the line, if we don't have time, we'll connect with you one-on-one, and then there'll also be a follow-up with some of the frequently asked questions that we do see here in the Q&A. But to go ahead and kick us off here as far as kind of our first question, let's go ahead and get this up. So the first question that I see here is that they don't really understand the Bonterra network, so to speak. So do you mind kind of breaking that down again, Tully, and giving folks additional context to that?
Yes, it took me a little bit to wrap my head around too. Okay, so I always think it's helpful to think about analogies. Sometimes it's also something that we think about all the time on the product team. So whenever you see Bonterra Network, think in your mind, new capability that connects me with another persona in the social good space. So program director connecting with potential volunteers, executive director connecting with grant administrators, right? Bonterra Network equals the features where those connections happen. The first one being grant match. Bonterra Network, a good analogy to what we are trying to build is, for better or worse, LinkedIn, where LinkedIn is really a place where job seekers and companies, those that hold job opportunities, connect. And you can apply, you can learn things about each other, you can establish relationships. That is essentially what we're trying to do for philanthropy. So anytime you see Bonterra Network, think, okay, LinkedIn of social good doers connecting with social good funders. And there will be, like LinkedIn, several features on that platform. Grant match being one of them, and there will be several more to come. Yeah, that was a really good question. I really appreciate that.
Awesome. And I think the analogy really helps break it down. So
Okay, good.
lovely. We had a question come in from Mia who said, I noticed that programming caseload were examples of core objects, but not yet available. Are those are features in Apricot already? Are they not objects?
That is such a good question. And the answer is kind of. So, we love Apricot so much. We love Apricot, but so much of Apricot is form-based, right? Like in the form builder, I can pull over these forms. And in the very, very early days, every single part of Apricot, including program, including users, in addition to the fields that y'all work with, and forms and fields that you work with and build every day, we're also forms. So the level of non-standardization and what it really means for us, reasonability, is high. So there has been some work on programs and some work on caseloads to move it more from these forms, from historical Apricot days, into objects that are much easier to work with, that have data minimums that are shared across Apricots. So I really should have put programs and caseloads as like a in between status, but you should see additional work on programs and caseloads to make them more this level of standardization with this much level of richness and configuration underneath, versus what it is right now, which is like some work we've made it standard to make it workable, and a significant amount of richness and configuration. So great question. You got me on that slide. I really love that.
Awesome, awesome. I see a lot of questions through the Q&A, talking about drafts and kind of being interested in starting to use the drafts and kind of how could they get started using that?
Yes. Okay. Drafts. If you are an Apricot administrator, you should be able to turn on drafts from Apricot settings. If you are a non-admin user in Apricot, I believe you should see a banner somewhere in Apricot with instructions on how to maybe ask your administrator. So either admins, you can turn it on in Apricot settings, or anyone feel free to enter a case and we will get that turned on for y'all. Also plug, there is a ton of good information in our knowledge base article about how to turn it on as well. And maybe I can include that in the follow-up or the blog that we post.
Awesome, wonderful. That would be super helpful. I'm also seeing several questions coming through talking about cross-check, and interest in kind of using cross-check and when that will be available.
Oh, okay. Yes. So cross-check is currently available now for touch points. Sarah Sweet and her team are still coding and working on it, bringing in additional parts of ETO real estate, like entities like families. So available now for a percentage of functionality, available in the coming months for additional parts of ETO functionality. So definitely check your email, make sure you're on our newsletter so you can see when that additional real estate is getting pulled in to cross-check.
Wonderful. We also had a question come in from Drew, and Drew asked that they're excited to see APIs on here, and does that mean that you're planning on opening up Apricot's API?
Great question. So the answer is yes, asterisk. The vision is we are building Apricot to an open AI place. However, there's a lot of security, administration, additional endpoints that we need to add in the Apricot API to make it open, safe, and have all the pieces of data that you would probably need to interact with in a push-pull way. So yes, open API with protections. This won't affect any integrations or third-party development that you have now. It just opens up the possibility and the different ways that you will be able to build integrations. So yes, that is the vision.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you, Tully, for adding that additional context here. Folks on the line here, I am seeing a lot of similar questions throughout the Q&A, and a lot of additional questions that are probably better suited for a one-on-one conversation with maybe our account manager, or someone from our team. So to that, I want to say that we will be following up with some folks directly to answer some of these questions, especially as it relates to kind of their unique needs and questions. And also, like Tully mentioned, and I mentioned, there will be a follow-up blog post that goes through some of these more frequently asked questions, because just scrolling through a lot of them, we're getting a lot of similar ones that I think can better be addressed in like a little more lengthy blog post here. So with that, folks on the line, I want to just thank you for your time and your attention this afternoon. We definitely appreciate it. And we appreciate you spending the hour with us to learn more about what we have upcoming and what to expect from us. And Tully, I want to thank you for your time and your work on this presentation, and sharing with us all the exciting things coming to Apricot and ETO. And I know folks on the line are excited for a lot of these features. So thank you, Tully, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. And yes, additional plug, if you are interested in beta testing and checking out our grant match tool, go ahead and email me directly so I can get you a slot on that list. But again, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone here, and I'm excited to continue to do the best work I can for y'all.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your time again. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And we hope to see you at the next roadmap later this year. Awesome. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, y'all.